This Notebook LM video examines how Pseudo-Dionysius' conception of angels influenced Christian theology for centuries. Depicted as immortal messengers, guardians, and guides fulfilling God's will, angels were arranged into 9 orders within 3 spheres, forming a cosmic hierarchy that became a cornerstone of Christian thought.
You know, that quote from the Bible, it really sets a fascinating stage, doesn't it? It hints at this hidden world moving just out of sight, a world of celestial beings who might be a whole lot closer than we think.
Hello and welcome. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on one of the most structured and, frankly, fascinating concepts in all of Christian tradition, the world of angels. And yeah, you can forget that simple image of a single type of angel with a harp. We are talking about a highly organized, 9-level cosmic bureaucracy that has shaped art, theology, and our very vision of heaven for centuries. So let's get into it and see how this celestial order was actually built.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the basic role of angels, then we'll uncover the mysterious figure who literally wrote the book on this system. After that, we'll look at the 3-tiered structure, do a deep dive into each of the 9 choirs, and finally, see how this ancient blueprint is still making waves today.
So, before we jump into the really complex ranks, let's start with the basics. What are angels, according to the Bible? Because, let me tell you, they are way more than just background characters for nativity scenes.
Their main job is right there in the name. The word angel actually comes from the Greek angelos, which just means messenger. But they're also described as these incredibly powerful guardians, as counselors, and as guides. Scripture even tells us they're immortal beings. So with such a vast and powerful force out there carrying out God's will, you start to wonder, right? How is a force this massive even organized?
Well, it turns out, the system we basically all use today comes from this one, single, hugely influential text. It was written by a figure who is completely shrouded in historical mystery, and his work became so influential, it was basically treated as the definitive blueprint for heaven itself.
Okay, and here's where the story gets really wild. The book, On the Celestial Hierarchy, was penned by some anonymous author way back in the late 5th or early 6th century, but he wrote it under a pseudonym, Dionysius the Areopagite. Now that was a real person, an Athenian judge converted by St. Paul himself 400 years earlier. For centuries, pretty much everyone thought this text came directly from the age of the apostles, which gave it this incredible, almost scriptural authority. Today we just call the author Pseudo-Dionysius.
So for this guy, hierarchy wasn't just some cosmic org chart or a simple power structure. No. To him, it was a sacred process, a pathway. The whole purpose of this entire celestial order is to guide all of creation step by step, closer and closer into perfect union with God. Now, Pseudo-Dionysius knew that some of the descriptions of angels in the Bible were, well, they were bizarre. We're talking fiery wheels, creatures with 4 different faces. And he basically said, yeah, that's the whole point. He believed that if angels were just described as, beautiful glowing people, our minds would get stuck on that literal image. By using these strange, incongruous symbols, the mind is forced to throw out the literal and reach for a higher, more profound truth.
Okay, so that brings us to the actual structure he laid out. Pseudo-Dionysius took the 9 orders of angels he found in Scripture and organized them into this really elegant 3-part framework.
And boom, here it is, the entire celestial map in one go. You've got 3 spheres, or triads, and each one has 3 choirs of angels. The first sphere, those are the ones who exist in God's direct presence. The second sphere are kind of like the celestial governors, the ones who manage the universe. And that third sphere, they're the divine messengers who interact most directly with us down here.
All right, so now it's time to zoom in. Let's take a closer look at the specific jobs and characteristics of each of these 9 angelic orders, and we're going to start right at the very top.
So we're starting at the absolute top, right there in the blinding presence of God himself. Here you have the Seraphim, whose name means the burning ones. They're beings of pure light and fire who just endlessly sing God's praises. Right beside them are the Cherubim, who possess a fullness of knowledge and act as guardians of divine wisdom and glory. And finishing off this first sphere are the thrones, often shown as these great fiery wheels, who contemplate divine justice with total humility.
Okay, so remember what Pseudo-Dionysius said about bizarre imagery? Well, check this out. This description of a cherub from the prophet Ezekiel is a perfect example. This is not your cute, chubby baby with wings. This is an awesome, terrifying celestial being, a mashup of the four most powerful creatures they can imagine at the time.
So how in the world did that become, well, this? It's a fantastic example of how interpretations change over time. That powerful, four-faced guardian from the Bible slowly morphed in Western art into the image we know as a Pseudo. That chubby winged infant that was actually borrowed from classical art's depictions of Cupid. That's a pretty dramatic shift in imagery, wouldn't you say?
Dropping down into the second sphere, we meet the celestial governors, the ones who are managing the day-to-day operations of the universe. You've got the dominions, who maintain cosmic order and carry out divine justice. Then there are the virtues, or the shining ones, who are the conduits for miracles and govern the laws of nature. And finally, the powers, who are the frontline warriors, defending all of creation from evil forces.
And at last, we get to the third sphere, the angels who have the most direct contact with our world. The principalities watch over entire nations and big institutions. The archangels act as God's great heralds, delivering the really big history-changing messages. And finally, the angels themselves, the order closest to us, acting as our personal guardians and carrying our prayers to God.
The archangels are probably the most famous of all the choirs because, well, they have names, and they have very specific, famous missions in the Bible. You've got Michael, the great warrior and protector, who cast Lucifer out of heaven. Then there's Gabriel, the ultimate messenger, who announced the birth of Jesus to Mary. And Raphael, whose name literally means God heals, and acts as a healer and a guide.
But you got to understand, this wasn't just some abstract thought experiment for theologians. This celestial blueprint would literally go on to shape Western civilization for centuries.
Think about it. Because everyone thought this text came from the 1st century, it was treated as the absolute authority. The great medieval theologian Thomas Aquinas built it right into his masterpiece, the Summa Theologiae. Artists like Botticini painted it. The earthly church even started to model its own hierarchy, with all its different orders of clergy, on this very same heavenly structure. Now, it's really important to remember that this is not the only game in town when it comes to Christian beliefs about angels. The Latter-day Saint movement, for instance, has a very different theology. While the traditional view sees angels as these totally separate spiritual beings, Latter-day Saints believe angels are actually resurrected humans, or the spirits of people who have lived or will live on this earth. In their view, the Archangel Michael is Adam, and Gabriel is Noah.
You can really see this difference in Joseph Smith's description of his encounter with the angel Moroni. You see the difference? This isn't some abstract spiritual idea. He's describing a tangible, glorious person, a resurrected human from a past civilization now acting as a messenger for God. It's a really fascinating theological contrast.
So when you boil it all down, what's the big takeaway here? It's that a book, written by an unknown author under a false name, was mistakenly thought to be from the age of the apostles. And that one mistake gave it so much power that its detailed map of heaven went on to define how Western Christianity saw the celestial world for over 1,000 years.
And that really leaves us with one last thing to think about. This whole elaborate system, from those burning seraphim all the way down to our own personal guardian angels, it speaks to a really deep human impulse. Why do we feel this need to create order, to draw maps and build hierarchies for a reality that is, by its very nature, a profound mystery? What does that tell us about us? Thanks for joining me.